Hey guys, tonight we sail into the murky, groaning belly of pirate ships, where the air smells like sweat, salt, and something you really hope isn't what you think it is. The wind whips through tangled ropes, sea spray mists your sunburnt face, and a distant cannonball thuds into the sea, but you barely flinch. You've got bigger problems. A soggy head of lettuce is rotting in the corner of the galley, and believe it or not, that's the real danger. Yeah, cannons? Sure, they're loud and flashy, but they mostly miss. Lettuce, on the other hand, or rather the absence of it, can slowly, painfully kill you from the inside out. And you probably won't survive this voyage. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where in the world you're drifting off. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing aboard a creaky brigantine somewhere in the Caribbean, 1723. The sun's been roasting the deck for days, and what's left of the provisions below deck isn't so much edible as it is alive. A faint squelch comes from a barrel that used to contain salted pork. You decide not to investigate. Instead, you peer into the galley, where a cook wearing only one shoe and 3 teeth is hacking at a loaf of ship's biscuit with a dagger. There, in a corner, lies a crate filled with what used to be lettuce. Used to be. Now it's more of a soggy swamp of despair, and nobody dares touch it. Even rats walk around it in solemn respect. Why, you ask, would a bunch of bloodthirsty pirates fear a vegetable? Simple, they don't fear the lettuce itself. They fear what it represents, or more precisely, what happens when they don't have it. Scurvy. Weakness. Madness. Death. You can't exactly pillage the high seas when your gums are bleeding and your teeth are falling out like wet dominoes. The thing is, nobody really understands why the body starts falling apart on long voyages. Some whisper it's a curse. Others say it's the devil punishing greedy sailors. But a few smart, or lucky, ones begin noticing a pattern. Crews that stumble across islands with citrus trees seem to fare better. Crews with lettuce, and yes, even dandelion greens or wild herbs, don't drop like flies. But good luck convincing a ship full of hardened criminals that salvation comes in salad form. And lettuce, poor lettuce, becomes the ultimate irony. A symbol of health in a world of rot, it's delicate, fragile, and requires things pirates don't have: fresh water, gentle handling, and time. Try keeping that crisp and perky on a ship where even your drinking barrel has a worm floating in it. Historians still argue whether early pirates actually understood the nutritional value of greens or just saw it as part of shoretime luxury. There's no consensus. Some say pirates knew enough to seek citrus, others claim they confused vitamin C with general freshness. But what we do know is that fear of lettuce deprivation, as one snarky surgeon's journal put it, haunted the crew in ways no cannonball ever could. Cannonballs explode. Lettuce decays, and takes your crew with it. Now imagine you're sailing for weeks, maybe months, without a single leafy green. You've got weevils in your flour, maggots in your meat, and the water's gone green. Some men start to mumble in their sleep, others can't stand because their legs are ballooning with mysterious lumps. Then there's Tom, the cabin boy, who tried to eat sea moss and hasn't blinked since. And in this foul, floating prison, lettuce becomes something more than a vegetable. It's a myth, a miracle, and sometimes even a meme. That's right, pirates actually had a form of gallows humor where they joke about finding a salad aisle, a magical place where greens grew in piles and no one ever had to drink bilge water again. They'd laugh about it in the same way people today joke about winning the lottery, because deep down, they knew they'd never see it. Quirkier still, some pirates personified lettuce in sea shanties. One poorly remembered song from the 1700s features a verse where Lady Romaine dances on a coral reef, seducing sailors to their doom. The joke? She promises health, but only lures them closer to the rocks. Even then, salad had trust issues. And while captains prepared for cannon fire with strategy and gunpowder, they fought the leafy menace with desperation and hope. Some captains even tried growing lettuce in small dirt boxes on deck, tiny floating gardens that usually failed, either drowned by rain or devoured by birds. One famous French pirate, Captain Giroux, allegedly wrote letters back to his wife begging for cabbage seeds, not gold, not guns. Cabbage. You grip the rail, staring at the horizon. Somewhere out there, there might be an island with fresh greens, a savior in the form of arugula. But more likely, you'll just keep sailing, pale, weak, and slowly unraveling, because you're not afraid of cannonballs anymore. You're afraid of lettuce. You wake to the familiar creaking of timbers and the slosh of seawater just inches from your hammock. Your breath tastes like old rope and regret. Breakfast? If you're lucky, it's a slab of salt pork so dry it might qualify as a weapon. If you're unlucky, and let's face it, it's hardtack. Ship's biscuit. A flour and water brick that's been aged like fine cheese, except with more insects. You crack one in half and a weevil pokes its head out to wish you good morning. Welcome to the rot beneath the rations. 18th century pirate ships weren't floating cornucopias. They were, more accurately, moldy buffets of disappointment, where food went to die and men followed soon after. The pirate life was sold as free and wild, but nobody mentioned that dinner might crawl off your plate. The preservation methods of the day, salting, drying, barreling, could keep food edible-ish for months, but they didn't exactly keep it fresh. And nothing, absolutely nothing, could preserve lettuce. Oh sure, the quartermaster might claim they brought aboard a few heads of cabbage or lettuce at port, but those went bad within days. Lettuce, that tender, leafy, high-maintenance diva, just couldn't hack it in a hot, damp, poorly ventilated hull. So it wilted. Then rotted. Then liquefied into a murky green stew that somehow managed to smell like despair itself. And what did pirates eat instead? Salt beef hard enough to chip teeth. Beans that were often more bug than bean. Dried peas boiled into mush that tasted like rainwater filtered through an old sock. Even their luxury item, cheese, was often infested with red worms. That wasn't a rare horror story, it was Wednesday. Historians still argue whether the quality of pirate food was worse than that of the Royal Navy. Some claim pirates, being independent and able to raid coastal farms, actually had slightly better pickings. Others point out that Navy rations were, at least, consistent. What's certain is that pirates didn't sail for the cuisine. And forget refrigeration. The best cooling system they had was a damp rag and denial. Lettuce, if it boarded the ship at all, was doomed before the sails even unfurled. But pirates still craved it, craved anything that didn't crunch like gravel or wiggle mid-bite. You begin to see why the thought of lettuce haunted them. It wasn't just food. It was hope. Hope that maybe your next meal won't require a knife, a pickaxe, and a prayer. Let's not forget the drink situation. Water barrels went rank fast, growing algae and hosting things that should never be in a beverage. Wine and beer were better but ran out quickly, or were stolen. Some pirates drank seawater in desperation, which, spoiler alert, is a terrible idea. If you weren't already losing your mind from vitamin deficiency, a few pints of ocean would finish the job. So how did anyone survive? Barely. You might stumble upon an island and raid some fresh coconuts. If you were lucky, a merchant vessel you captured might have oranges, yams, or preserved fruits on board. But more often, you'd drift for weeks with nothing but wormy flour and pickled fish for company. And it wasn't just the lack of nutrients. Food went bad. Bad in the kind of way where men opened barrels and found rats, mold, or worse, a smell so noxious it earned nicknames like Devil's Cough and Hull Butter. The cook once tried making stew from a suspiciously blue barrel labeled cabbage. Half the crew didn't show up to dinner again. Ever. Quirky records even mention attempts at shipboard gardening. A few enterprising captains tried growing lettuce or parsley in pots. The idea? Harvest a little bit of green between ports. The result? Total failure. Salt air killed the plants, crew members accidentally ate them early, or someone mistook the lettuce pot for a latrine. Not necessarily in that order. And so pirates lived in a constant loop: eat bad food, feel worse, dream of greens, then get mocked for it. There were jokes, dark ones, about finding a floating head of lettuce and naming it Captain. You even hear tell of one pirate who tied wilted parsley to his hat as a joke. When he died of scurvy, no one laughed again. What makes this worse? Many of these men remember what lettuce tastes like. They didn't grow up on the ocean. They came from farms, towns, villages where salad was a summer treat, not a fantasy. They remember the crisp snap of a fresh leaf, the clean bite of bitter greens, the coolness against a dry tongue. And out here, surrounded by salted nightmares, that memory becomes cruel. Pirates didn't fear cannons. Cannons were fast. Predictable. Loud, yes, but you could fire back. Lettuce, or more accurately, the lack of lettuce, was quiet. It crept up on you in the night. One morning, your joints ached. The next, your teeth wobbled. Then came the bleeding gums, the split skin, the weakness, the hallucinations. That's not a death. That's a meltdown, a slow, leafy betrayal of your own body. So yes, the food is technically edible. But you now understand the subtext of every shared glance during meal prep, every suspicious sniff of a biscuit. You eye your bowl of stew. It bubbles. Something inside bobs to the surface. You pretend not to see it. And you think about lettuce again. Not because it's your favorite vegetable, let's be honest, it's nobody's, but because it represents everything you no longer have. Health. Freshness. Safety. A body that doesn't feel like it's eating itself. The rot beneath the rations isn't just the food. It's the slow realization that you're surviving, but you're not really living. Not until you find a leaf, just one, that hasn't turned brown. Your gums are bleeding. Not like a little, I forgot to floss, sort of situation, but a full-on crimson waterfall every time you try to chew anything harder than lukewarm gruel. And don't even think about sneezing, your nose will gush like it's auditioning for a Shakespearean tragedy. This isn't just poor hygiene. This is scurvy, the long, slow revenge of the sea on anyone bold enough to sail it without proper salad. You lie back in your hammock, if you can call this fraying canvas sling a bed, and try not to move. Even your joints feel like they've been stuffed with broken glass. Your legs? Swollen. Your breath? Foul enough to kill barnacles. And you know it's only going to get worse. Scurvy doesn't pounce. It creeps. It starts small: fatigue, irritability, a little soreness. Then, like a jealous ghost, it begins dismantling you piece by piece. Teeth loosen. Wounds won't heal. Old scars reappear like a cruel magic trick. In the final stages, your organs start shutting down, one by one, like lights flickering out on a sinking ship. And the best part? It's preventable. Entirely. Completely. You just need one tiny thing: vitamin C. Historians still argue whether 18th century pirates understood the connection between citrus fruits and scurvy prevention. Some believe they had a vague sense that fresh things helped: lemons, oranges, even wild herbs. Others claim the link wasn't truly understood until decades later, with James Linn's famous naval experiments in 1747. But you? You know one thing for sure. Nobody's handing you a lime right now. You're not alone in this misery. The crew's falling apart. One man's legs are bloated and purple, his skin so sensitive it tears like parchment. Another's gone mad, screaming about a talking onion that lives in the mizzenmast. There is no onion. You checked. Even the captain looks more ghost than man, his once proud coat hanging on a body that's eating itself from the inside. And where is the lettuce? Where is the cabbage, the kale, the parsley, any of the things that might save you? Long gone. Eaten, spoiled, or never loaded aboard in the first place. A few days ago, someone claimed to have seen a green leaf floating in the bilge. Half the crew rushed below deck to investigate. It was moss. We ate it anyway. Quirky remedies circulate the ship like ghost stories. One old sailor swears a daily spoonful of vinegar keeps scurvy at bay. Another rubs his gums with rope tar. A third says if you stare at the sun and whisper the name of your childhood donkey, your teeth will tighten right back up. Desperation breeds creativity. And infections. Sometimes you wonder what it would have been like if someone had just brought lettuce. Not barrels of it. Just enough. But it never made the cut. Why? Because it spoiled too fast. Because it took up space. Because the quartermaster preferred to haul more gunpowder, more rum, more gold. It's hard to argue with that logic, until you realize your ship has become a floating hospice. The irony isn't lost on you. You've braved storms, survived raids, dodged bullets, and wrestled sharks. But now? Now you're dying in your hammock because of a leaf deficiency. Not exactly the glorious pirate legend you imagined. The cook, who now doubles as the surgeon since the last one succumbed to weevil poisoning, inspects your mouth with a spoon. He frowns, grunts, and mutters something about lemon ghosts. You don't ask. He wraps a rag around your knees, offers a dram of rum, and moves on to the next patient. That's the entire medical treatment, alcohol and sympathy. There's an old barrel in the corner. Once it held pickled cabbage. Now it holds despair. A few weeks ago, someone scraped the last sour leaves from its bottom. You remember the taste, salty, sour, strange. But afterward, your legs didn't hurt as much. That was the last time you felt truly alive. Now, even hallucinations are starting to bloom. One sailor swears he saw a head of lettuce floating alongside the ship. Others talk about a green mermaid offering parsley to the dying. One man threw himself overboard trying to catch a salad he swore was bobbing on the waves. They never found him. Historians often overlook how deeply psychological scurvy became among sailors. It wasn't just a disease of the body, it was a disease of the mind, of morale. When the crew started breaking down, order collapsed. The strong became weak. The loud went quiet. Even laughter disappeared. In a world where camaraderie kept mutiny at bay, scurvy was the great equalizer, turning everyone into a trembling mess. And the cruelest part? The cure is stupidly simple. Not an exotic potion or rare mineral. Just some lemon juice. A spoonful of cabbage. Even wild lettuce would do. But you don't have it. And at this point, you'd give up half your share of treasure for a single green leaf. Funny, isn't it? You signed up to chase gold and freedom. But now you'd trade it all for a salad. So you lie back again. Try not to cry, it'll sting your gums. You dream of fields. Of picnics. Of a crisp crunch between your teeth. You dream of lettuce, not because you ever really liked it, but because now it's the difference between life and death. And you understand, finally, why pirates feared it more than cannonballs. You grip the tin mug like it's a holy relic. The liquid inside sloshes gently with the ship's motion, thick, amber, pungent. It smells like a tavern, a campfire, and a regrettable decision all at once. Rum. Again. And not even the good stuff. This is grog, the great equalizer of the high seas. Rum diluted with water, sometimes with a hint of lime if you're lucky. Spoiler, you're not lucky. You raise it to your cracked lips, take a cautious sip, and try not to gag. Warm, metallic, and vaguely fishy. But this is what passes for hydration. Not water. Never water. Water turns into something you can name after a week in a barrel. Rum, at least, kills the things trying to kill you. Except scurvy. It has a truce with scurvy. A secret handshake. You'd think pirates would prioritize keeping water drinkable. You'd be wrong. Water went stagnant in the dark, stifling belly of the ship. Wooden casks didn't just contain water, they also hosted mold, algae, and the occasional decomposing rat. If you wanted to drink water, you had to strain it through your shirt and then pray to at least 3 deities before swallowing. So, pirates turned to grog. And grog became everything. A mood lifter, a sleeping aid, a painkiller, a disinfectant, a breakfast. Historians still debate how much grog a pirate drank on an average day. Some say up to a quart, others argue it was limited to keep sailors functional. But let's be honest, if your teeth are falling out, you're not exactly trying to stay sharp for performance reviews. You begin to realize how rum blurred more than just vision. It blurred time. Morale. Even disease. When your body starts breaking down from vitamin deficiency, it's easier to ignore it if you're pleasantly numb. Rum takes the edge off reality. That loosened tooth doesn't hurt quite as much when you're 3 mugs deep. That rash? Could be scurvy, could be fleas. Either way, cheers. And yet, despite its religious-level devotion to grog, your crew still yearns for lettuce. It becomes the secret thought behind every sip. The Holy Grail. The forbidden leaf. The drink in your hand keeps you from going mad, but the thing you need, the thing your bones cry out for, can't be poured. Some captains tried to compensate. They spiked the grog with anything vaguely green. Dock leaf extract. Vinegar. Pickle juice. One notorious pirate, Thistle-eyed McCree, insisted that floating spinach leaves in the rum would speak to your blood. It didn't. He died. But not before hallucinating that his grog turned into a lettuce fountain. There's a fringe theory, just that, a theory, that pirates occasionally created fermented, green tonics, using spoiled vegetables mixed with rum and seawater. These brews were thought to balance the humors. In practice, they balanced the crew into unconsciousness. Still, these attempts show a desperate understanding. They needed something green. They just had no idea what or how to keep it alive in liquid form. Meanwhile, the Royal Navy was slowly catching on. Lime juice became part of standard rations in the mid-18th century, though even that took lobbying, experimenting, and a lot of ignored sailors' corpses. Pirates, however, weren't so organized. They didn't have scientists. They had Old Bill with the glass eye, who once saw a carrot, maybe, on a Spanish galley. Rum becomes a mask. A fog you wear to avoid confronting how brittle your body feels. You sip and pretend you don't feel your muscles weakening. That your breath doesn't smell like a haunted tomb. That your fingernails aren't curling like dead leaves. It's not all misery. Grog leads to music. To raucous songs sung beneath a star-punched sky. Laughter bubbles up with every drink, and for a few golden hours, you forget. You forget the cannons. The scurvy. The fact that your skin bruises at the mere suggestion of work. But morning always returns, and so does the ache in your joints. The sour taste behind your tongue. The longing, not just for greens, but for clarity. Because grog may hide the illness, but it doesn't cure it. It just makes you stop caring. And then one day, someone doesn't get out of their hammock. Ever. The cook has tried adding mint to the grog once. He claimed it was medicinal. Everyone agreed it tasted less like a ship's sock. A small miracle. But mint wasn't lettuce. It didn't restore lost muscle, didn't reverse rotting gums. It just made your burps smell festive. You start fantasizing about a drink that heals. Not just numbs. A fresh pressed juice from spinach and lemon. Cold. Sharp. Green. The opposite of what you're drinking now. The opposite of this life. And in a twisted way, lettuce becomes the anti-grog. It represents what rum can never be: clean, life-giving, pure. You want a salad shot instead of a rum shot. But for now, your only option is the warm swill in your mug, and maybe a prayer. So you sip. Slowly. Pretending it helps. Pretending it's enough. Pretending you're not slowly unraveling in a sea of alcohol and dreams of greens. Because out here, there's only grog. And lettuce? Lettuce doesn't sail. You lie back on the table, if you can call it that. Really, it's just a plank balanced over two barrels, stained with things best left unmentioned. A lantern swings above, casting a yellow glow across a collection of tools that look more suited for woodwork than medicine: rusty saws, bent forceps, a spoon with mysterious burn marks. Standing over you is the ship's barber surgeon, part stylist, part torturer, and, in theory, your only hope of survival. He grunts. Lettuce. Shoulda eaten more lettuce. You'd laugh if your jaw weren't throbbing. The irony is thick enough to choke on. You've survived storms, mutinies, and cannon fire, only to end up here, under a man who once stitched his own pants to a fellow crew member's thigh. The diagnosis is scurvy, again. But now it's gotten complicated. Your gums are oozing, your legs are ballooning, and a wound from 2 weeks ago refuses to close. The surgeon pokes at your leg with something that might have once been a fork, nods solemnly, and declares the treatment: amputation. You try to sit up. Bad idea. The room sways. Or maybe that's you. Either way, your odds of walking away are dropping faster than the ship's reputation for hygiene. He readies his saw. There's no anesthetic. Just a bottle of rum, a leather strap to bite down on, and a choir of disapproving rats watching from the rafters. The assistant, a boy who might have been 12 5 years ago, holds your shoulder as the surgeon begins. Historians still argue whether shipboard surgeons truly believed in nutrition-based medicine or just treated the symptoms as they appeared. Some journals suggest they understood the link between fresh greens and better recovery. Others show them prescribing bizarre cures: powdered coral, vinegar compresses, even mercury. Yes, mercury. Because when in doubt, poison seems like a logical step. But what's consistent in every account? Fear. Not just of surgery, but of what happens if it's not done. Wounds that fester, limbs that blacken, a slow internal unraveling that no saw can stop. And behind so many of these wounds? The quiet, leafy culprit: vitamin C deficiency. In a world where medical theory included things like bad air and imbalanced humors, the idea that something as mundane as lettuce could be the missing ingredient was almost insulting. Yet the evidence was there. Crews that landed on islands and gorged on greens seemed to recover. Those that didn't, well, you're living that reality. The surgeon mutters about a lettuce deficiency like it's a joke, but deep down, he knows. They all know. He saws. You scream. Somewhere nearby, someone starts singing a shanty to drown it out. Not out of cruelty, out of tradition. It's how they deal. You try to focus on the rhythm, on the lantern's sway, on anything but the blade grinding through bone. And through it all, you think of greens. A salad. A pile of cold, crunchy lettuce, glistening with fresh dew. You'd trade your entire share of treasure, what's left of it anyway, for a single bite. The surgery ends. Somehow, you're still breathing. You don't thank the surgeon. He doesn't expect it. He pats your shoulder and moves on to the next patient, one who looks worse than you did. You're bandaged with old sailcloth and tucked into a shadowy corner of the hold. The smell is unbearable. Salt, sweat, old blood. The kind of scent that settles in your bones and never quite leaves. Every few hours, someone pours a little grog on your bandages and calls it disinfection. You try not to scream again. There's a man beside you, older, half-conscious. He mutters about a garden he once had. Rows of lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers. He says he can still taste them. He says the lettuce used to whisper to him in the breeze. You'd call him mad, but you understand. You're starting to hear the whispers too. Open scholarly debates still swirl about how pirates conceptualize disease. Some believe they saw scurvy as a curse or punishment from the sea gods. Others suggest it was understood as a blood sickness, something that needed to be bled, burned, or otherwise banished. But the idea of nutrition as cure? That was fringe science. Radicals with herb gardens and suspiciously clean teeth. And yet, the knowledge spread, quietly, slowly. Sailors began stashing lemons, cabbages, herbs. Some even cultivated them in secret, sharing nibbles like contraband. Lettuce became legend, a folk medicine whispered in hammocks and cargo holds. A cure you could never get your hands on, but dreamed about when the fever came. Back in your corner, you doze. Dreams twist with reality. In one, your leg grows back, made entirely of lettuce. You run, hop, leap like a child through fields of greens, every leaf singing your name. Then you wake to pain and damp cloth. The ship lurches. You're still at sea. A small rat creeps near, sniffing your bandage. You wave it off weakly. You envy its resilience. If it eats something green, it might live longer than you. You understand now, more than ever, why pirates feared lettuce, not because it was dangerous, but because it was the one thing that could have saved them, and it never showed up in time. You shuffle to the rail, leaning heavily on a cane fashioned from a broken mop handle. Your breath catches with each step, your mouth dry as old parchment. The breeze tastes of salt and maybe something darker, gunpowder, maybe. Or rot. But you're not thinking about battle. You're thinking about salad. Specifically, about a certain kind of salad you've only heard of in whispered rumors, the kind served on English ships. The kind that included actual citrus. Lemons. Oranges. Sometimes, it said, even cabbages packed in brine. These sailors, the ones you and your mates once mocked as limeys, might have been soft, but they weren't dead. You squint across the ocean, half expecting to see a British frigate sailing smugly by, its crew rosy-cheeked and very much not bleeding from the gums. They're the enemy, sure, but right now, you'd give your last coin to trade places, just for one lemon slice. The term limey, by the way, didn't start as a joke. It started as envy. British naval policy eventually required lemon or lime juice to be served daily aboard their ships. This wasn't because the Royal Navy was particularly generous. It was the result of medical experiments, like James Linn's now famous trial in 1747, where citrus-fed sailors recovered while their vinegar-guzzling peers wasted away. It wasn't magic. It was vitamin C. Historians still argue whether pirates picked up on this trend as it was happening. Some say they noticed, adapting as best they could by stealing citrus during raids or sweet-talking port vendors. Others insist most pirates remained in the dark, caught up in superstitions and survival, ignoring the slow-motion death that came from nutrient-starved blood. What's certain is this: those who did get access to greens or citrus, even sporadically, fared better. You've heard tales of captains who stocked barrels of lemon peel. Of crews who ground up wild parsley into a gritty paste. One daring sailor even tried to ferment cabbage leaves into something vaguely edible. Sea kraut, they called it. He died, but they admired the effort. The logic was simple: a salad could save you, maybe. But try telling that to a crew that's been rationing maggoty bread and grog for weeks. Try explaining that the thing they mock as rabbit food might be their last defense against a slow, miserable death. Lettuce isn't just unglamorous, it's impractical. It wilts, it bruises, it vanishes within days on a hot deck. And yet, here you are, aching for it like it's gold. Some enterprising captains tried preserving greens in vinegar. Others packed whole cabbages in sawdust or brine. It kind of worked. At least long enough for the first few weeks. You remember one shipmate, a hulking brute of a man who once bit the head off a live fish, who cried when the last pickled cabbage was gone. He died 2 weeks later. No one made fun of the crying again. You think back to a story you heard once, probably apocryphal, but comforting. A merchant ship captured by pirates had a crate of lemons. The pirates, not recognizing their value, tossed most of them overboard, keeping just a few for drinks. Within a month, half the crew had collapsed. By then, the remaining lemons had turned black with mold, as if mocking them. One man tried to eat the rind. It didn't go well. That's the thing about this life, you learn too late. Too late to grow a garden. Too late to ration the pickles. Too late to understand that maybe the British weren't soft, they were smart. Now, let's not give the Royal Navy too much credit. Their citrus policy wasn't consistent until later, and many sailors still died miserably before science caught up with desperation. But when it worked, it worked. And when pirates saw those ruddy-cheeked sailors walk ashore with their teeth intact, they didn't scoff. They stared. You remember once sneaking ashore in the dead of night to steal supplies from a Dutch coastal outpost. Among the loot, a sack of onions, a sprig of parsley, and, miracle of miracles, a bruised head of lettuce. The crew fought over it like it was treasure. The winner didn't eat it right away. He just stared at it for a while, cradling it like a newborn. Then he ate it leaf by leaf, eyes closed. He said he could feel his blood waking up. Whether he actually felt better or just believed he did doesn't matter. Sometimes, belief is its own medicine. There's a fringe tale, maybe true, maybe sea nonsense, of a pirate captain who switched sides after a British officer offered him a whole salad at port. Lettuce, carrots, even a slice of boiled egg. He wept. He surrendered his ship and joined the Navy that very day. "I just wanted to eat something that didn't fight back," he reportedly said. Now, you sip your grog and watch the sky turn orange with dusk. The crew is quieter now. More are sick. The cook's been whispering about brewing something with seaweed and vinegar. You've seen the barrel. It's bubbling. But you hold on to the dream. The citrus dream. The leafy miracle. Somewhere out there, maybe there's a port selling cabbages by the crate. Or a merchant ship with oranges rolling in its hold. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll wake up one morning and find a sprout growing through the cracks in the deck. Wouldn't that be something? Because you know now, a salad isn't just a meal. It's a lifeline. You reach into a sack tucked beneath a loose plank, fishing out what you think might be a sprig of something green. It's brittle, dusty, and smells a little like mildew and old socks, but one of the older deckhands insists it's medicinal. "That's dock leaf," he says. Or maybe sage. Either way, chew it slow. Pretend it's lettuce. You chew. It's not lettuce. This is what your life has become, identifying whatever wilted herb, leaf, or unidentifiable sprout you can scavenge from port or storage and hoping it has the secret sauce, vitamin C. Because even if you don't know what it is scientifically, you know your body wants it. It practically sings when something green enters your mouth. Your bones sigh in relief. Your gums stop screaming for half a day. Then it fades, and you're back to square one. Welcome to the pirate's game of, is this edible? The truth is, pirates didn't always have clear labels. They didn't say, we need vitamin C, or find some leafy greens with antioxidant properties. What they did say was stuff like, bring me that bitter weed that doesn't make you puke, or didn't that Spanish crew look healthy? Let's eat what they ate. Historians still argue whether pirates ever truly understood the distinctions between herbs, fruits, vegetables, and what we'd now call nutrients. The lines were blurry. Some called citrus sour lettuce. Others thought parsley was magical. There was a particularly strange moment on your last voyage when a crew member boiled dried tobacco leaves and tried to make tea from it. He didn't die. But he did believe the figurehead was whispering ship gossip to him for 3 straight days. You weren't sure whether to take notes or run. There's something oddly poetic about how pirates hunted for lettuce without actually meaning lettuce. Sometimes they used that word to mean cabbage. Sometimes spinach. Sometimes seaweed. It became a symbolic placeholder, the stand-in for anything green and potentially life-saving. That's why, when someone shouted, "I found lettuce," from below deck last week, half the crew scrambled down like gold had just been discovered. It turned out to be mold growing in a damp flour sack. Green, yes. Leafy, no. You begin to realize that lettuce doesn't just mean one plant, it means hope. Survival. Anything remotely resembling the crunch and coolness of life. That's why you've seen sailors grind tree bark into dust and stir it into grog. Why they scrape moss off rocks and make poultices for swollen joints. Why someone once claimed to have found air lettuce in the sails and collected it in a jar. It was just mildew. They drank it anyway. Some pirate ships kept small potted plants near the helm, not because they were good decorations, but because they represented a tether to the land. The idea that something fresh and alive could grow on a death-smelling ship gave people a weird sort of comfort. One captain even named his parsley plant First Mate Letty. When it died during a storm, the crew held a funeral. With actual crying. In your own pocket, you carry a dried leaf. You don't even know what it is. Someone gave it to you in a Spanish port and said, "This helped my brother." That's enough. You haven't eaten it. Not yet. Maybe you're saving it for when your gums get worse. Maybe you just want to believe you still have options. There's even talk, half-mad talk, of a rare plant that grows on Caribbean cliffs, supposedly able to cure scurvy with a single leaf. They call it pirate lettuce, though nobody agrees on what it looks like. Some say it glows at night. Others say it tastes like lemons and never rots. One man claims he smoked it and spoke to his dead father, who told him to eat more fish. True or not, it's a better story than the truth. You're dying of malnutrition on a ship filled with weapons and no wisdom. Still, people keep trying. In a drawer somewhere, the cook stashed a tiny book of curative greens, probably stolen from a British officer. You've seen him flipping through it under candlelight, mouthing the Latin names like spells. Maybe he believes one of those herbs could be the next miracle leaf. Or maybe he's just trying not to go mad. Back in the galley, someone's made a broth out of something foraged. It tastes like wet rope and sadness, but you drink it anyway. Later, your stomach hurts, but not in the usual way. This time it's hopeful pain, like your body's unsure whether to heal or revolt. You remember land. Real land. Dirt that squishes between your toes. Gardens. Fields. Leaves that grow without turning black in 2 days. And you realize how distant it feels now. Lettuce might as well be made of diamonds. Unobtainable. Sparkling. Worth killing for. And yet, every so often, someone does find something real. A sprig of thyme from a raided kitchen. A piece of ginger from a wrecked cargo ship. Even a spoiled orange that still has a hint of juice. You pass it around like communion. You chew slowly, eyes closed, pretending it's enough. Because in this floating prison of salt and steel, lettuce by another name might be all you have left. You duck into the hold, the heavy door groaning shut behind you. Down here, it's darker than sin and smells like mildew's third cousin. But the real treasure isn't gold or rum, it's hidden behind a stack of barrels labeled iron nails that definitely do not contain iron nails. You glance around, then lift the lid of the rearmost crate. Inside? Contraband citrus. 3 limes, a bruised orange, and, miraculously, a tiny sack of something leafy and faintly green. You swear you can smell life in there. The crew calls this the green cash, a pirate's version of a black market pharmacy, and you're not supposed to know about it. But desperate times make desperate men into whispering thieves. This is the underworld beneath the underworld, the part of pirate life where forbidden lettuce gets passed around like opium, traded in hushed voices, rationed out in secret bites. Because no one wants to admit it, but everyone knows, the ship's dying. Not from cannons. Not from mutiny. But from a slow, leafy starvation. The black market of vitamin C isn't run by the captain. It's not even officially acknowledged. It's curated by a few sharp-eyed sailors who understand that citrus and greens are more valuable than gold, especially when no one else has them. One man hoards dried lemon peel in a sack tied to his thigh. Another has a stash of pickled onions hidden in the gunpowder locker, labeled explosives. And you? You've traded half your tobacco pouch for 2 pathetic cabbage leaves that you now ration like sacred wafers. Historians still argue whether this underground trade existed in an organized way or was just scattered self-preservation. But journals mention it. Code words. Unofficial trades. Green iron sometimes meant fresh vegetables. Yellow powder could mean citrus rind. One logbook even described a crew member who used limes as betting chips in a card game, and won. You remember a raid on a merchant vessel last month. While others looted the strongbox and muskets, one quiet man climbed into the galley and didn't emerge for 10 minutes. When he did, he had a sack of oranges. Not a word was said. But the next day, he walked straighter, smiled more. He shared none of them. You didn't blame him. Back on your ship, the unofficial greens dealer is a man called Finch. Short, wiry, with the kind of beard that makes soup nervous. No one knows where he gets his stash, but rumors range from bribed dockhands to secret gardens in the bilge, unlikely, unless lettuce now grows in absolute darkness and rat pee. He never gives anything for free. But if you've got rum, tobacco, ammo, or gossip, he'll trade. You once gave him a carved trinket you found in a wreck, just a bit of ivory shaped like a tooth. He gave you a strip of lemon peel and told you to chew it once a day. You did. Your joints ached less. It felt like a miracle. Or maybe just the bare minimum of what your body needed to not implode. And it's not just about health. These hidden greens carry power. The one who holds the limes can negotiate. Can sway votes during mutiny talks. Can buy silence or loyalty. It's an invisible currency, silent and green, shaping fates below deck. But there's danger too. Last week, a man was caught sneaking into Finch's crate. They didn't kill him. But they did take everything he had and left him chained in the hold without food for 2 days. Not because he stole, but because he endangered the supply. You start to see how fear of lettuce isn't just physical. It's social. It creates tension, envy, power imbalance. Those who have greens are gods. Those who don't, rot. The inequality isn't just in loot or rank anymore. It's in salad access. There's a strange moment that stays with you, 2 crew members fighting over a bundle of chard, or something pretending to be chard. They were usually friends. Shared stories. Sang together. But that day, it got ugly. One had found the greens and tried to hide them. The other saw. In the scuffle, the food hit the deck and was crushed underfoot. Nobody won. Nobody spoke for days after. You realize then, this is the new gold. Not treasure chests or silver doubloons. But greens. Leaves. Rinds. Anything that fights the silent killer living in your bloodstream. One sailor, who rarely speaks, began trading lemon peels for poetry. Write me a story, he says, and I'll give you citrus. You think he's mad until he gives you the best sleep you've had in a week. You write him a tale about a garden that grows on clouds. He gives you a single mint leaf. You suck on it for hours like it's priceless candy. Historians often focus on pirate economy in terms of booty, ports, and barter. But the real economy, the survival economy, was leafy and secret. A world of green under the red and gold. And now, back in the hold, you hear the shuffle of another desperate man creeping toward Finch's stash. You watch in silence. You understand the hunger. But you also know, the moment that lid opens, someone is going to lose something. Maybe not their life. But maybe their last chance at health. Or at dignity. So you turn away. Because if you see what's inside, you'll want it too. You already do. And lettuce, on this ship, is the one thing worth dying for. You hear it before you see it, the sound of smashing crockery, the scrape of boots on damp planks, the unmistakable thud of someone being thrown across the galley table. You limp toward the ruckus, heart thudding, not because a fight is rare, but because of what they're fighting over. It's not gold. Not rum. Not even boots. It's parsley. Two grown men, both of them seasoned pirates who've slit throats for less, are in a full-blown brawl over a wilted sprig of parsley someone had hidden behind the barrel of pickled herring. You stare, wide-eyed, as they slam into the bulkhead, fists flying, curses echoing off the low ceiling. One of them screams, "It was mine." The other screams, "You hid it." That makes it everybody's. Nobody knows where the parsley came from. Some think it was part of a stolen merchant galley's food stash, forgotten and then rediscovered like buried treasure. But the moment it came into daylight, it became more than garnish. It became power. Health. Possibly even a cure. And that's when it happens, something rare and horrifying. Mutiny over mesclun. All it takes is a crew hanging on by threads, both physically and mentally. One small spark, say, a fistfight over a garnish, and suddenly, the entire ship is on edge. Sides are drawn not by loyalty, but by who got a bite and who didn't. Someone yells about fairness. Someone else claims Finch has been hoarding. Within minutes, blades are drawn. You duck as a plate shatters above your head. Mutiny, you realize, isn't always born of greed or rage. Sometimes, it's born of malnutrition. Of cracked minds and bodies breaking down. You can feel the tension snapping. Every man here has scurvy in some form. Some are just better at hiding it. Some, not so much. Historians still debate whether mutinies were ever sparked over food specifically. Most records cite disputes over pay, treatment, or poor leadership. But some fringe journals tell of provisions riots aboard ships. One account describes a mutiny when the last onion was sliced unevenly and the favored officer got the biggest piece. Another tells of a captain poisoned with bitter herbs after refusing to share his personal orange stash. Here, now, on your ship, the cause is parsley. But it could have been anything green. The fight spills onto the deck. The captain finally intervenes, his pistol raised, eyes wild. "We die together or we eat together," he bellows. Dramatic. But nobody's really listening. They're watching the bruised, half-crushed herb clutched in a trembling hand. A symbol of everything they've lost. The cook, desperate to calm the mood, snatches it up and drops it into the stew pot without ceremony. There. It's gone. Now it helps everyone. The effect is, mixed. Some cheer. Some curse. One man weeps. That night, dinner is quiet. You sip your bowl of murky broth, which now smells faintly of parsley and regret. You can almost taste it. Almost. But it's not enough to restore health. Just enough to remind you of what health tastes like. Someone starts a chant in jest. Parsley for the captain, parsley for the crew. Parsley once divided us, now it's in the stew. Everyone chuckles. But it's the kind of laughter that hides broken teeth and broken spirits. Later, you find yourself thinking about how easy it would be to prevent all of this. How a crate of lettuce or a few sacks of dried citrus could have saved days of madness, bloodshed, and hunger. But that's not how ships work. They prepare for cannonballs, not cravings. For storms, not salad-based civil war. You learn that the ship is a pressure cooker. When resources are scarce, especially the ones that stave off disease, everything becomes political. Every green leaf is a vote, every citrus wedge a promise. And in the aftermath of the Great Parsley Incident, new rules form. Finch is ordered to distribute his stash under watch. The cook now drops lemon peels into the grog, though mostly for show. And the captain declares that any greens found must be shared communally. It sounds noble. But you know what'll happen. People will hoard in secret. Hide herbs in boots. Swallow cabbage raw before anyone sees. Because once you've tasted survival, even almost tasted it, you'll do anything to have it again. Even betray your mates. Even start a mutiny. You stare at the stars that night, your belly full but your spirit hollow. There's nothing left to fight over, at least not this week. But the hunger still lives in your bones. Not just for food. But for what food means out here, a chance. A future. A ship that doesn't have to rip itself apart over something that, on land, grows in ditches. Somewhere out there, you tell yourself, is a place where lettuce is plentiful. Where no one stabs their best friend over an herb. But until you get there, you keep your own little dried mint leaf tucked inside your shirt. You'll never be that hungry again. You're on shore leave, finally, an island that's mostly rock and heat, but it has trees. Real ones. And dirt that doesn't slosh. The sun bakes the sand, and your boots sink with every step as you follow a crooked path into the jungle behind a local guide who insists he knows where the good greens grow. You squint through the foliage, half expecting a wild boar or a rival crew to leap out, but no, what you find instead is a clearing filled with plants, long and leafy, vibrant and unreal, like someone took your most delirious scurvy dream and made it bloom. There's wild spinach. Cabbagey things. Bitter herbs. And yes, lettuce. Actual, honest-to-Neptune lettuce. And standing in the middle of it all is the guide's uncle, a barefoot, wiry man with a necklace of shells and a look in his eye like he's seen too much. He grins at your shocked crew and announces, "You found the garden of fireproof leaves. These? They make you strong. Cannonballs fear them." You blink. Welcome to the Caribbean lettuce cults. Okay, cult might be a strong word. But over time, in port towns and forgotten islands, you've heard more and more strange talk about miracle greens. Not just healthy, but magical. Protective. Some say if you chew the right leaf under a full moon, your wounds won't fester. Others believe that eating a particular island herb before battle makes you immune to blades. Historians still argue whether these beliefs originated from local traditions, pirate exaggeration, or just the sun cooking too many brains. But one thing's certain, pirates were desperate enough to believe anything. You kneel beside a leafy plant the guide calls blood leaf. He says warriors used it to keep their courage in their skin. You don't know if that means vitamin C or divine blessing, but you pluck a handful anyway. Your crewmate stuffs his pockets like he's gathering emeralds. Later that day, the cook boils some into a bitter soup. You drink it because of course you do. And surprisingly, you feel better. Not cured, but lighter. Less like a ghost with sea legs. Maybe it's real. Maybe it's hope in broth form. Either way, no one argues when the captain orders a full barrel of the stuff hauled back to the ship. The older islander tells stories that night. About greens that whisper. Herbs that sing. Lettuce that glows faintly when a storm is coming. He points to one broad-leafed plant with purple veins and says, "That one? Cannon won't hit you if you wear it. The younger crew laugh. You don't. Not because you believe him, well, not entirely, but because you want to. You want something to push back against the reality of tooth loss and open sores. You want a shield, even if it comes in salad form. Some pirates, those who've survived multiple voyages, become downright religious about these plants. One first mate insists on chewing a certain root every time you raise anchor. Another swears he hasn't had scurvy in years thanks to sun lettuce, a spicy-tasting leaf he keeps in a damp pouch tied to his belt. He licks it daily like some men kiss their lucky coins. And then there are the true believers. You've heard of ships that turn their mess into greenhouses. One crew supposedly built a terraced garden on the forecastle deck, tended daily by a man who called himself Priest of the Green. They didn't raid gold. They raided farms. When asked why, they simply said, "You can't eat doubloons." Another tale tells of a captain who wore a crown made of celery stalks. He was either insane or enlightened, or both. He forbade cannon fire unless the crew had eaten greens that day. Rumor says his ship never lost a battle, but did once nearly sink because a cabbage crate cracked and took on seawater. Fringe as it all sounds, the fear of scurvy had created believers. Not just in science, which wasn't very scientific yet, but in stories, rituals, anything that promised a way out of the slow decay that haunted the sea. Back on your ship, the garden you brought with you begins to grow in barrels of loamy island dirt. At least for a few days. It's a struggle to keep the salt air from wilting everything, but now you're watching life instead of death. It changes things. The crew stops looking so pale. There's more laughter. More strength in their steps. Fewer men coughing blood. Even if it's a placebo, it's a powerful one. And in the dark of night, as you lie on the deck and watch the stars, you hold a leaf to your chest and whisper, "Just keep us alive." You don't know what kind of plant it is. Doesn't matter. It's your cannonball shield now. You squint against the midday glare in a French port, somewhere coastal, thick with sailors, spice smoke, and the ever-present smell of brine and fish guts. Dockhands shout in 6 languages, crates are stacked like unstable pastries, and behind it all, tucked between 2 warehouses, something strange is happening. A man in a powdered wig is handing another man a recipe. Not a recipe for stew or fish pie. No, this one's written in code. Substitutions. Symbols. And right at the center of it, scrawled between the lines, frizzy. Curly lettuce. You're watching the less documented war of the age, French frizzy and naval espionage. Because when pirates and navies weren't lobbing cannonballs at each other, they were doing something arguably more ridiculous, passing secret lettuce knowledge across enemy lines. Sounds absurd, right? But consider this, in the 18th century, any edge in nutrition could mean the difference between a crew surviving the Atlantic or dying halfway through the return journey. Fresh greens, especially ones that could survive longer at sea, were worth more than military secrets in certain circles. And France? France had lettuce tech. Or so the rumors said. Historians still argue whether the French Navy truly possessed a superior method for preserving or cultivating greens at sea. Some say it was nothing more than drier weather and better planning. Others believe coded recipes passed through port cities like Bordeaux and Marseille, disguised as culinary correspondence, were actually part of a broader effort to keep French sailors alive longer than their British or pirate counterparts. What's not debated is the odd paper trail, journals describing encrypted lists of herbs, supply manifests hiding heads of cabbage under coiled rope, and even sea captains caught with detailed botanical drawings sewn into their coats. You saw one once. In a tavern, passed to you in secret by a former cook of the Fleur du Nord. A drawing of a hydroponic lettuce cradle, essentially a floating wooden frame designed to let frizzy grow in salt air with minimal soil. Laughable. Impractical. But it worked, he claimed. He'd seen it. Eaten it. Said it was like chewing a cloud made of healing. That man had all his teeth. Just sayin'. You never saw that drawing again. He was arrested 3 nights later, smuggling contraband cabbage, they said. But you remember it. The detail. The tiny annotations in code. A curly-headed savior. You start to notice the pattern. Ships with better access to greens last longer. French merchant vessels, especially, have a habit of sailing farther, returning leaner, stronger. Some think it's just French cuisine. Others think it's lettuce-fueled espionage. The British, naturally, weren't pleased. There's one bizarre tale, maybe half true, about an intercepted French schooner carrying not weapons or rum, but crates filled with fermented kale. British sailors, convinced it was poison, dumped it all. Weeks later, half of them were dead from scurvy. The survivors renamed the ship the Green Widow. Another whisper says Napoleon's chefs developed a method to sun-dry lettuce, turning it into an herb-like flake that could be added to grog. A little bitter, they said, but potent. It supposedly kept sailors snappy on long voyages. The British tried to replicate it using turnips. Results were disappointing. And smelly. And where does this leave you, a common pirate trying to patch your aching joints with parsley and lies? In the middle of a leafy arms race, that's where. You've heard of pirates intercepting French ships not for gold, but for their galley gardens. One infamous raid captured nothing but onions and frizzy. The crew declared it a holy day. Ate everything raw, right there on the deck. A week later, they sacked a fort. Coincidence? Probably. But after so long at sea, you start seeing patterns in leaves. There are even spies now. A man who calls himself Le Crescent floats from ship to ship, posing as a chef. But he's really gathering lettuce intelligence, who's growing what's surviving longest, what's fermenting without killing people. One rumor says he once swapped a recipe for survival soup in exchange for a stolen compass. No one knows his real name. But you're told if you whisper "frizzy" 3 times in a French port, he might appear. You haven't tried. Yet. Tonight, back on your ship, someone pulls out a worn scrap of paper. On it, a recipe written in a mixture of French, Latin, and sailor slang. It includes lemon peel, sea salt, dried mint, vinegar, and, yes, frizzy. The cook attempts it with the limited ingredients you have. It tastes like pickled moss. But afterward? You breathe easier. You sleep without your legs cramping. It's not a cure, but it's something. And as you drift off, you wonder if someone, somewhere, is reading your own green secrets. If maybe your crew, once seen as wild and unclean, now holds a recipe someone would kill for. Because in this era of sails and smoke, where bullets fly and men lie, lettuce knowledge is power. And somewhere, right now, a coded letter about salad is being read by a spy in powdered shoes. It's past midnight. The ship creaks like it's dreaming, sails slack in the moonless dark, and the crew is quieter than usual. Not just because they're tired. Because tonight is the kind of night sailors don't like to talk about. A bad luck night. A cursed air night. And someone has just thrown a head of cabbage overboard. You didn't see who did it, only the splash, the gasp, the way everyone paused. Then the whispers began. Someone muttered, "Should have buried it." Another hissed, "You never toss green things on a waning moon." The ship's oldest hand spits on the deck and hobbles below, muttering about bad omens. You're learning now, pirates didn't just eat greens, they feared them. Or, at least, certain greens. On certain days. Under certain stars. Welcome to the weird and leafy world of salad and superstition. It sounds ridiculous until you're living it. But after months at sea, with bodies breaking down and minds slipping sideways, it's no surprise that even a humble sprig of arugula might start looking a little cursed. Historians still argue whether pirate superstitions were rooted in actual cultural beliefs or just evolved from seafaring madness and boredom. The line between useful herb and demonic salad was alarmingly thin. And nowhere was that line blurrier than with leafy greens. You learn quickly what's acceptable. Parsley? Fine, unless you pick it on a Sunday. Cabbage? Only if it hasn't wilted. Spinach? Said to absorb evil spirits, some pirates wore it in pouches around their necks. Arugula? A volatile green. One sailor swore it gave him visions. Another claimed it whispered battle strategies. Someone made it into tea once. He woke up speaking backwards. There's even an old tale passed around on deck like an oral relic, about the lettuce bride. She was a woman made entirely of greens, grown from a cursed ship's garden that was watered with the blood of mutineers. Anyone who ate her leaves was blessed with strength, but only for a day. After that, they'd rot from the inside out. It's absurd. And yet, when the galley boy finds a particularly pale piece of cabbage, he throws it into the sea just in case. You laugh at first. Then you stop. Because on this ship, laughter gets quieter the sicker people get. Even the act of burying greens has ritual. If a barrel of lettuce turns, you don't just toss it. You give it a proper burial, over the side, during sunrise, with a coin tossed after it to pay the green spirit. Miss that step, and you'll regret it. Or so they say. You remember one shipmate, Thomas, who mocked the ritual. Said it was leaf-loving nonsense. Later that week, his hammock collapsed. Then he fell through a rotted plank. Then he broke a tooth on a weevil in his biscuit. You couldn't prove it was lettuce revenge, but you noticed no one doubted it. And it's not just individual superstitions. Some whole ships carry green taboos. One refused to allow cabbage aboard, believing it attracted krakens. Another painted their hull with a paste of mashed mint and rum, to ward off rot. The logic is slippery, but you start to believe it when the unpainted ships vanish in storms and yours sails through fine. There's even a fringe story, recorded in a half-burned journal you found in a Spanish wreck, of a pirate crew that worshipped an island lettuce god. They left offerings of lemon rind and honey at a small shrine carved into coral. The captain claimed he could hear the god whisper when the tide was right. His ship never suffered scurvy. Then again, they also kidnapped a French botanist, so maybe they had inside help. One sailor insists certain greens go bad in the soul if picked under starlight. Another wears a sprig of thyme behind his ear and claims it keeps his mind sharp. A third believes touching wilted salad curses your bloodline. He wears gloves. All the time. And still, you eat whatever greens you can find. Carefully. Respectfully. You don't mock the parsley rituals anymore. You don't joke about the haunted spinach. Because while superstition might not cure scurvy, it might stop your crewmate from smothering you in your sleep for sniffing his basil stash. What's more disturbing is when the lines blur. When someone sees a leaf twitch in a bowl of stew and insists it's a sign. When your dreams start including vines growing from your arms. When a rotted sprout in the bilge smells distinctly like your childhood bedroom. You don't tell anyone about that last one. There's one final tale that floats around your ship, a story told only during storms. About a cursed lettuce that once grew on a shipwrecked garden. Anyone who ate it lived forever, but never healed, never died, never slept. A green eternity. Alone. At sea. You scoff when you hear it. But part of you wonders, what if it's still out there? And would you eat it, if it meant never feeling your teeth loosen again? So when someone drops a leaf overboard, you watch the splash with a bit more respect. You say nothing, but later, you press a tiny mint leaf to your lips and whisper a quick apology. Just in case. Because maybe lettuce won't save you. But you're starting to think it sees you. You're summoned to the captain's quarters, a rare enough event that you're already suspicious. He's seated at his desk, poring over a parchment that looks suspiciously like a supply ledger, though from the way he tries to hide it when you step in, it's clearly not just about rum. "Sit," he growls. You do, nervously. He stares you down, then nods toward a locked chest in the corner. "We had cabbage," he says. "Royal cabbage. Smuggled. Hidden." Your heart skips. "And now," he continues, voice like grinding rope, "we don't." The air shifts. Because what he's about to tell you is the sort of thing that doesn't show up in history books, but lives in every corner of the sailor's psyche, the quiet, strategic denial of greens. The unspoken war that happens not on the waves, but in supply logs, dock slips, and shady backroom deals. It's time you learned about the Royal Navy's leafy lies. Turns out, it wasn't just pirates struggling to get lettuce on board. The Navy knew, decades before it admitted it, that scurvy was preventable. But they didn't tell everyone. And certainly not pirates. Historians still argue whether this secrecy was deliberate malice, bureaucratic incompetence, or some toxic blend of both. But official documents were altered. Supply chains were sabotaged. In some cases, entire barrels of preserved greens went missing. And when desperate pirates tried to acquire them, they often found only salt meat and lies. The captain opens the ledger. It's scribbled in at least 3 different handwritings. The line items are innocent enough: medical stores, miscellaneous herbs, crew comfort. But there, circled in faded ink, are entries for Royal Vegetable Supply, Type 3. No specifics. Just a weight. A date. And a coded mark beside each one, RS. You don't need to be a spy to know what that means. Restricted stock. He slams the book shut. "They're keeping it from us," he mutters. "Feeding their own. Letting the rest of us rot." And you realize, it's true. The Royal Navy had started quietly stockpiling preserved greens, dried cabbage, pickled kale, and yes, barrels of shredded lettuce mixed with vinegar and brine. They tested them on select crews. Those ships returned healthy. Strong. Intact. But did that information get shared with merchant captains? With rival navies? With pirates? Absolutely not. In fact, some Navy captains were allegedly ordered to burn leftover produce after docking, rather than risk it falling into enemy hands. There's even a fringe theory, whispered in dockside taverns, that one notorious pirate ship was scuttled not for gold theft, but for stealing a crate of Royal Navy citrus. And what happens when pirates do get their hands on greens? Well, they tend to disappear. There's a case the captain tells you about now, voice low, a fellow privateer who intercepted a British galley carrying experimental, sailor sauerkraut. The pirates took it, stored it, ate it, and within a week, half their crew were dancing jigs on deck, teeth intact and skin glowing like healthy drunks. 2 days later, a British frigate tracked them down and sank their ship. No survivors. Except the sauerkraut crate, which mysteriously washed up in Gibraltar a week later, in Navy hands. Coincidence? Or cover-up? You don't know. But the more you dig, the more it becomes clear, the Navy had lettuce. And they weren't sharing. Even official policy shifted, quietly. Naval cooks were instructed to call cabbage rations type 9. Oranges became vitamin tonic units. That way, if a manifest fell into pirate hands, they wouldn't know what to look for. It's clever. And infuriating. So what were pirates supposed to do? Beg? Buy? Sometimes they tried. Dock officials in crown-controlled ports would laugh them off. "No greens for thieves," one was overheard saying. "Let 'em chew cannonballs." You've seen desperate pirates try to smuggle cabbage from neutral territories, only to have it confiscated at sea under the guise of customs enforcement. The explanation? Rot-prone goods. But somehow, the confiscated greens always ended up feeding British crews. Your captain now leans in close. They'd rather we die than get healthy, he says. Because a strong pirate is a dangerous pirate. And you believe him. You start seeing the pattern everywhere now. Accidental spoilage of greens on purchased merchant vessels. Mysterious blackouts in supply routes. Captains who speak too freely about lemon water and then vanish at sea. Even maps, deliberately omitting green-rich islands. It's not just war on the ocean anymore. It's a salad embargo. Back on deck, the cook reveals something he's been hiding, a single tin of pickled kale. Smuggled in a box of tools. Unlabeled. Royal Navy issue. You all take turns sniffing it like it's perfume. When he opens it, everyone gets a spoonful, exactly one. It tastes sharp, sour, alive. And for the first time in weeks, your mouth doesn't hurt. You chew slowly. And you think, not about treasure, but about justice. Because somewhere out there, floating smugly on polished decks, are men with clean uniforms and fresher breath. Not because they fought harder, but because they had better salad access. And you? You have rage. And one less cabbage. You're elbow deep in soil, well, more like clumpy, salty muck jammed into a splintered crate. The ship sways beneath you as you gingerly pat the base of a pale, suffering lettuce sprout. It's drooping already. Hasn't even seen a full sunrise on deck, and it's giving up. Come on, little guy, you mutter. Live. This is your third attempt at growing greens on board. The first died of salt spray. The second was accidentally used as a mop. Now, this sad leaf is all that stands between you and believing in miracles. Because here's the bitter truth, lettuce doesn't travel well. On land? Sure. It's delicate, yes, but manageable. Wrap it in a damp cloth, maybe nestle it in a basket, and it makes it from farm to plate. But at sea? Out here in the blistering sun, with wind screaming salt into every crevice and barrels of water jealously guarded like dragon treasure, lettuce is as doomed as a snowflake in a cannon. Historians still argue about whether 18th-century mariners truly understood the fragility of greens, or whether they were just too stubborn to admit they couldn't pack salad. Either way, the result was always the same: rotted crates, wilted hope, and the occasional emotional breakdown in the galley. You remember one voyage where the crew loaded a whole crate of fresh produce, lettuce, cucumbers, even some scallions. It was beautiful. The cook wept tears of joy. Within 4 days, it was all mush. The ship had hit rough water, the crate got soaked, and by the time someone checked, it was a composting nightmare. You could hear it squelch before you even opened the lid. You begin to appreciate why some pirates turned to fermented greens, pickled cabbage, or even dried lemon peels. Not because they wanted to eat things that tasted like vinegar-flavored regret, but because it was that, or nothing. The problem is, lettuce is not a fighter. It's not rugged like hardtack, or eternal like salted pork. It needs cool air, moisture control, and zero jostling. So unless you're cradling it like a newborn and singing lullabies, it dies. Fast. Some ships tried planting gardens on board, tiny boxes of dirt lashed to railings or tucked into corners. They did everything they could: shade cloth, water rations, even crew members assigned to whisper encouragement. That last one might have been a fever hallucination. Still, lettuce would bolt, wilt, or get eaten by rats before it could be harvested. One particularly sad story involves a pirate who guarded his lettuce patch more fiercely than the rum stores. He made a scarecrow out of mop handles. Named each plant. Called them his leafy lads. When they died during a heat wave, he held a funeral. Played a pipe song. Then shaved his head and took a vow of silence until they reincarnated. He was mostly fine after that. Others turn to alternatives, hardier greens like kale, mustard leaves, or even wild herbs. Less fragile. Less fussy. But still, they didn't satisfy the craving. Lettuce had that soft, crisp snap, the kind that reminded you of life before the sea chewed you up and spat you out. You've tried everything. Storing leaves in vinegar. Hanging them in baskets above the galley heat to avoid moisture. Even pressing them between flat boards like leaf jerky. It never works. At best, you get lettuce that resembles seaweed. At worst, it becomes a sponge for every foul smell on the ship. There's even an old joke among sailors. What's the only thing that spoils faster than a lettuce at sea? A pirate's retirement plan. Okay, not that funny. But you're working with limited material out here. And yet, some fools, yourself included, keep trying. You hear tales of Portuguese ships that managed to grow watercress in barrels. Of Dutch smugglers who lined their cargo holds with moss to keep greens damp but not soaked. One insane legend even claims a Spanish captain built a glass greenhouse in his upper deck, complete with drip irrigation using condensation from his breath. He was either a genius or profoundly lonely. Still, even with all the stories, you've never seen lettuce truly survive at sea. And that knowledge gnaws at you. Because it means you're always a little broken. Always one leaf short of whole. Your gums may stop bleeding for a day, your bones may ache less after a shot of citrus, but until you hear that crunch, you'll never feel right. Some say it's symbolic. Lettuce, being too fragile for this life, becomes the stand-in for everything the sea takes from you: comfort, softness, land. Others say it's the universe's joke, giving you a cure you can never carry. But you're not ready to give up yet. You bring the sprout below deck, cradle it in a warm cloth, and tuck it into a dark corner. You feed it slivers of water. You name it. You talk to it. You protect it from the galley boy who once tried to use parsley as pipe stuffing. This time, maybe it'll survive. Because if it does, then maybe you will too. You're in the cargo hold with the quartermaster, and he's sweating more than usual. Not because of the heat, though it's hotter than a boiled shark down here, but because he's trying to do something impossible: fit everything the ship needs into a space the size of your grandma's closet. He mutters under his breath, kicking a barrel of dried beans and eyeing a crate labeled "leafy rations, fragile." Next to it, a stack of cannonballs, neat, round, and ready to rip through hulls. The dilemma becomes painfully clear: cannonballs or cabbage crates? You watch him do the math in his head. One cannonball weighs about 24 pounds. One crate of greens, assuming it hasn't already liquefied, may be the same. But one explodes on impact, while the other might save a man from bleeding out through his gums. One makes you strong now, the other keeps you strong later. Guess which one gets tossed first? It's not hard to understand. When a ship engages in battle, it's not vitamins they're flinging at enemy rigging. And yet, you can't help but wonder, how many battles would never happen if the crew wasn't too sick to hold a cutlass? Historians still argue whether provisioning decisions favored firepower over food due to strategic necessity or sheer short-sightedness. Naval records show a constant juggling act between arms, water, wood, food, and rum. But rarely, do you find mentions of greens, as though they were an optional luxury rather than the immune system in a crate. You lean on a barrel marked "flour" and think back to that one voyage where they prioritized cargo space for ornamental tableware, fancy brass candle holders from a captured merchantman, while the only vegetable aboard was a single onion. It became the most heavily guarded item on the ship. Someone carved it a tiny throne. That ship later ran out of powder mid-raid. The onion survived. The cook wept. Now, the quartermaster pulls a cloth off a half-rotted box and shows you what's inside: lettuce. Real. Wilting at the edges, but not gone yet. From Havana, he says. Traded rum for it. The whole barrel. You both stare at it. One cannonball clinks against the wooden floor, a low, heavy sound. Another gets shifted aside. The quartermaster scratches his beard. Could fit this crate if we ditch one stack of 12-pounders. You raise an eyebrow. 12-pounders win battles. He shrugs. So does not dying. And there it is, the unspoken war within every ship's hold. The fight not just between nations, but between survival strategies. Between offense and endurance. Lettuce versus lead. You're not the first to face this choice. There are legends of captains who built entire compartments just for greens. Others mocked them, until they outlasted every other ship in the fleet. There's even a tale of a notorious pirate known as Lettuce Jack, who refused to carry more than 6 cannons so he could dedicate half his hull to a portable greenhouse. People called him soft, until he boarded their ships while they were too weak to stand. Was he lucky? Maybe. Or maybe he just had the guts to pack the salad. You help the quartermaster lift the crate. It's heavier than it looks, greens don't weigh much, but hope has mass. Together, you wedge it beside the bread rations and toss a net over it to keep it from sliding in rough seas. It's not elegant. But it's secure. Outside, the crew is practicing drills. Cannons are rolled out, loaded, cleaned, run back in. You hear the shouts, the snap of ropes, the thud of wood on wood. It's easy to get swept up in that rhythm, the pulse of power. But below deck, there's a quieter rhythm. The soft crackle of leaves. The wet thud of water ladled onto roots. You pass the cook on the way back up. He smells like fish and mint and has lettuce in his beard. He nods once. That's all. You know what it means. Tonight, everyone gets a salad. Well, a few leaves each. A gesture of salad. And maybe that's enough. Enough to keep the teeth in. Enough to make the bruises shrink. Enough to walk a little taller tomorrow when the enemy flag rises. Because maybe, just maybe, a ship doesn't need one more cannonball. Maybe it just needs a little more green. You open the barrel slowly, the way you might approach a sleeping bear. The air inside hits you like a slap, sour, meaty, sharp with something metallic. Someone behind you gags. Another mutters a prayer in 3 languages. This is the lettuce barrel. It started its life 2 months ago as a hopeful experiment, shredded greens, packed with salt and vinegar, sealed tight in a repurposed rum cask. The goal? Fermented greens. Something to survive the sea, fight scurvy, maybe even taste halfway decent. The result? Well, it's moving. You poke it with a spoon and the surface twitches. Not violently. Not obviously. But undeniably. The mixture has taken on a color not known to nature. Somewhere between swamp and envy. The texture? Imagine if wet paper married regret. And the smell? Like someone pickled old boots and let them marry regret, too. Still, you know what happens next. You eat it. Because you have to. Welcome to the strange, desperate science of fermented greens and sea madness. It didn't start this way. The idea was noble. Inspired, even. If the Royal Navy could preserve cabbage as sauerkraut and prevent scurvy, why couldn't pirates do the same? Salt. Time. A sealed barrel. Done, right? Historians still argue whether pirate fermentation techniques ever approached anything close to safe or edible. But the fact that they tried tells you everything you need to know about life at sea. When you're watching your fingernails fall off and dreaming of spinach in your sleep, you'll gamble on anything. Including whatever eldritch stew just winked at you from that barrel. The cook ladles out a slimy scoop onto a crust of hardtack. It hisses, probably just trapped air, though a few crew members take it as a bad omen. One refuses to eat it. He'll be chewing his own tongue for vitamin C in a week, so you tuck a portion in your pocket for him anyway. You chew. It's sharp. Acidic. Fizzy. Your tongue burns a little. But you feel something. It's not healing, exactly. More like a reminder that you're alive. Like your taste buds just slapped your brain awake. Your stomach grumbles in confusion. Your skin tingles. You sit down, not from illness, but from unexpected clarity. Maybe it's working. Maybe not. A sailor nearby starts humming a song no one's ever heard before, rocking back and forth with a scoop of the stuff cradled in his hands like a kitten. Another claims he can now smell people's thoughts. You're concerned. Here's the rub, it's hard to tell where the line is between nutrition and hallucination when you've been starving for months. Is the fermented lettuce healing your blood, or simply waking parts of your brain you forgot existed? Is this clarity or just seasoned madness? One man sees his mother's face in his stew and thanks her. Another insists the barrel is growing, whispering promises of new recipes. Someone starts sketching plants on the walls of the galley, even though he can't write. The captain demands a taste. He frowns, nods, then says something quietly to the quartermaster. Later that night, a second barrel is started. You don't ask what's going in it. You just hope it doesn't involve squid again. What's most amazing is that the crew, gaunt, exhausted, probably hallucinating, feels better. Slightly. Temporarily. But better. The bruises fade a little. The bleeding gums stop pulsing. Joints stop cracking with every step. The cook, drunk on vinegar fumes and praise, calls it his miracle muck. You call it lettuce reborn. There's a quirky theory among fringe maritime scholars that pirates accidentally invented new probiotics. That their slapdash fermentations created gut-healing marvels we've only begun to rediscover. Whether that's true or not, there's no doubt something's happening here. The fermented greens become a ritual. A spoonful in the morning. Another at night. Some crew even start whispering to the barrel, joking, mostly. You hope. But there are risks. One morning, the second barrel explodes. Too much pressure, too little oversight. The stench is biblical. A sticky green cloud coats the hold. 2 men faint. One cries. The captain declares the incident an act of lettuce rebellion. But still, no one dies. And some swear they feel stronger. More alert. Less doomed. Which is, at sea, a win. You sit down beside what's left of the first barrel, carving a small leaf into the wood. Not a symbol. Not a prayer. Just recognition. Of everything this journey has taken. Of what the sea demands. Of how even madness can sometimes look like healing. And as you drift off that night, belly slightly full, head buzzing with salt and vinegar dreams, you think to yourself. Maybe fermented lettuce isn't a nightmare. Maybe it's survival in disguise. The new captain boards at dawn. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. Captain Morella, called the Verdant Ghost. A woman with a sword carved from petrified wood and a reputation for boarding enemy ships not with a roar, but a recipe. No one quite believes them. Until she arrives. First thing she does. She surveys the galley. Second thing. She plants a lettuce seed. No speeches. No drawn weapons. Just her, crouched beside a dirt-filled keg, tucking in a tiny seed like it's the most precious thing on the ship. You don't know whether to laugh or salute. Welcome to the final stretch of your leafy odyssey, where you meet the rare, maybe fictional, definitely strange souls who worship the salad. You think it's a joke at first. Until Morella begins her day by kneeling in front of the sprout barrel, whispering words in an old dialect, maybe Latin, maybe gibberish. And her crew follows suit, placing their hands on the soil before eating. This is no superstition. It's ritual. And oddly enough, it works. Nobody's sick. Nobody's teeth are loose. Their skin is tanned, but not pallid. Their eyes are clear. They move like warriors. You feel like a ghost by comparison. Her crew calls themselves the Leaf Eaters. Some tattoo vines up their arms. Others wear dried basil around their necks. One has a carrot top stitched into his hat like a plume. They don't mock the greens. They revere them. Historians still argue whether these leafy pirate cults actually existed or were invented by seafaring storytellers with too much grog and not enough oranges. But the records, those few that survived, hint at something more. Ships whose logs were annotated with moon cycles and watering instructions. Journals with prayers to Mother Mesclun. A half-burned chart that included not where the gold was buried, but where lettuce had once grown well. And now you're standing on a deck adorned with hanging herb baskets, watching pirates chant as they spritz a cabbage with lemon water like it's holy incense. You don't ask questions. You just take it in. Captain Morella runs a tight ship. No scurvy. No slop. The cook wears an apron with a painted arugula leaf and insists everyone chew their greens 20 times before swallowing. They even have a leaf locker, guarded by 2 burly men who probably bench press barrels of kale in their free time. You once watched a man get flogged, not for theft, not for mutiny, but for sitting on the lettuce box. It's ridiculous. And it's brilliant. Because Morella's ship sails farther. Faster. Harder. Her crew outlasts storms and battles. They board with strength, precision, and actual muscle tone. They win because they're healthy. Not lucky. Not ruthless. Just, nutrient-rich. You try to join them at one point. A tentative touch of the parsley altar before breakfast. No one mocks you. One sailor hands you a bowl of something green and warm. You eat it. You don't feel magic. But you do feel less brittle. Less like a man stitched together by sea air and spite. And here's the strange part, the reverence doesn't feel like a cult. It feels like respect. For life. For land. For the simple, silent power of a growing thing in a world full of iron and salt and fire. There's one crew member, silent as a shadow, who spends every free moment carving tiny lettuce leaves into the hull. He's etched over 100. Each one slightly different. It's not decoration. It's memory. Every voyage, every storm, every time a green leaf saved a friend, he marks it. You start doing it too. On your dagger handle. Just a notch at first. Then a swirl. Then a crude spinach scribble. No one laughs. You're one of them now. And then comes the battle. A merchant galleon, Spanish, armed to the teeth. They expect pirates, expect blood. But they don't expect a crew that moves like a choir. That climbs with strength. That bites into dried cabbage mid-swing like it's battle rations. The merchant crew surrenders in record time. Morella thanks them. Offers them lettuce wraps before letting them go. It's disarming. You're hooked. Maybe it's the endorphins. Maybe it's the salad. But you've never felt this alive. Later, you hear of other ships. The Spinach Queen. The Kale Kraken. Even a vessel called the SS Cobb rumored to have won 3 battles without ever firing a shot, just boarding, feeding the enemy citrus, and letting them go. The sea, it seems, is full of salad saints. And you? You're no longer just surviving. You're leafed. Even the cook has evolved. He wears rosemary behind his ear, talks to his thyme plant like it's his wife, and keeps a ledger of flavor combinations that could raise the dead or at least soothe your aching knees. And when new blood joins the crew, they don't get a cutlass first. They get a shovel. A pot. A single romaine seed and a quiet instruction. Grow this. You'll understand why. And they do. Eventually. Because now, finally, the world is catching on. Ports talk of green markets. Sea charts mark fertile isles not for gold, but for spinach potential. And pirates once mocked as root munchers are now respected, even feared, for their vigor. So when you dock, and someone scoffs at the basil drying on your mast, you just smile. Let them eat maggot bread. Let them think cannonballs win wars. You know better. You've seen the truth. The war was never sword against sword, flag against flag. It was lettuce versus decay. And lettuce won. Now, close your eyes. The waves lap gently against the hull. The stars above are soft, scattered like salt. Below deck, the last candle gutters beside a barrel of green things still alive. You hear the soft rustle of leaves in their crate, the whisper of a sailor singing to his spinach. You feel the sway of the ship. The softness of worn wood beneath your back. And in your belly? Not pain. Not emptiness. But calm. The sea still calls. The storms will return. But tonight, you're strong. The greens have done their work. Your breath is steady. Your body, whole. Let the world above worry about battles. Let the landlings debate their books and their glory. You have something far rarer. Peace. In this moment, under this sky, with this warmth in your chest and this sleep drifting in like fog, you are exactly where you need to be. Strong. Steady. And green at heart. Sleep well, sailor. Sweet dreams.